Tēnā koutou katoa, Nicole McKee here, Council of Licensed Firearm Owners. Over the last week or so, I have done some chats and recordings with members of Parliament about their perspectives and experiences with firearms. Now, this is not a debate on firearms legislation. This was actually our idea to get out to you what these people know about firearms, and we have varied participants from across the house for you to view. So, hey, go out there, watch what we have to show you. We hope you enjoy the videos. Welcome everybody, Nicole McKee here from the Council of Licensed Firearm Owners, and I'd like to welcome today Greg O'Connor, Labour MP for the Ohariu Valley electorate. He's joining us today to talk firearms. Welcome, Greg.
Yeah, kia ora, Nicole.
Now, before we get started, I just want to give everyone a little bit of background about you, some research that I've done. So please correct me if I have anything wrong here. So Greg, this is your first term in Parliament with the Labour Party, and you're currently sitting on two select committees, the Justice Committee and the Finance and Expenditure Committee. That committee heard the first and second tranches of legislation as it went through the hearing process, and I noticed, because I attended most of the hearings, that you were there as well. And I recognise that you took quite a devil's advocate view in some of your questioning of the submitters, both for and against. So you really did have a good listen to everything that people had to say there. You come from the Buller district on the west coast with a dairy farming background where you grew up with mum, dad and 8 siblings. And I understand that that possum trapping was a bit of a pastime in your youth and quite possibly as an adult as well. Now, many of our viewers will recognise or remember you, Greg, as being the Police Association head, and you were in that position for over 20 years. But what a number of them won't realise is the positions that you held before then within police, and that was as an undercover operative, but you also worked in homicide. And in fact, one of the cases, well-known cases that has not yet been solved is that of the Wellington Trade Hall bombing, where caretaker Eddie Abbott was tragically murdered.
Ernie Abbott.
Yeah, sorry, Ernie Abbott. Yeah, that's still to be solved. But you actually ended up finishing with police before heading into association at the rank of detective. Is that right?
Well, no, I actually never did finish with the police until I went into two years ago. I was still a police officer on secondment, and I still put the uniform on and arrested somebody, and as I say, saw an angry man and woman at least once a year through that whole time. So I was still a police officer, just on secondment.
And at the rank of detective?
No, I was a detective acting detective senior sergeant. I was a senior sergeant in Christchurch at the time.
Right. Okay, so you are married, Greg, with 3 children, and in your maiden speech at Parliament, you said you've had a lifetime of life experiences. And when I looked at some of your background, I thought that was quite a good sum up of some of the things that you have experienced. You have one of the children that needs some intensive care. You've been on a lot of community boards throughout different areas as well, and you've also overcome cancer, which is an experience in itself. So as Labour MP, your first term in the Ohariu Valley district, welcome to our little kōrero, our chit chat. And to let everyone else know, Greg here has a firearms licence. So Greg, tell us, when did you first get your firearms licence?
Anticipation of this, I'm pretty sure I got it in my teens, but remember, those of your listeners remember, you didn't actually need a firearms license to shoot on your own property in the good old days. I'm pretty sure I got it as about 18, 19-year-old. And that was the first time, but I'm digging deep into the memory there. But I certainly had it. I remember having it in my 20s anyway. So, but as I say, the licensing thing was a little bit different in those days.
And why? Why did you get a firearms license?
Oh, it was as natural as getting a driver's license. You know, I grew up in an area where, we had firearms. Good old house, there were plenty of firearms behind the door, and wherever else we used to store our firearms in those days. And grew up always had going. It was just a natural thing to do. You got your driver's license, you got your firearms license, and that was the sort of the lifestyle I grew up in.
Did you get your motorbike license as well?
No, I didn't actually. Although I have to confess, I did ride a few motorbikes, but we had farm bikes. Of course, rode again similar. Always rode farm bikes as in those days, but no, I didn't ever actually get around to getting my motorbike license.
That was just an out there question that came to mind when you said it was natural. A lot of the firearm license owners that I know all ride motorbikes, and when you said it was natural to get that license, I thought, oh, I wonder if you got your motorcycle one as well. Look, Greg, have you? I gather growing up in Buller.
I might say growing up in the Buller, it was wet a lot of the time, so motorbikes weren't that prevalent down there.
True. But growing up down in the Buller district on a dairy farm, I mean, I gather you must have done a fair bit of hunting. There's some good sized reds down there.
Yes, although I was in the area where TB was very bad down there, and this poisoning 1080 came in a lot. So the deer, I remember growing up as a kid wandering around the farm, we were always seeing deer sort of wandering off into the bush, and that sort of stopped for a long time. Bearing in mind, I left home as an 18-year-old, 17-year-old actually. So yeah, hares, no rabbits down there. Goats were the big thing, and yes. Some of my best memories of bombing up mobs of goats. Old Uncle Jimmy used to take me up we used to go up to the Mokanui, up into the Forks. A lot of people had been up there, and it was alive with goats in there those days, and it was nothing unusual to see a mob of 50 or 60 goats up there out on the sand. They were a lot of fun. Yeah.
So you still have your license now, and for what purpose do you need that license, Mr. O'Connor?
Well, because although I'm a hunter, although I would probably very loosely as a hunter, I just haven't. Most of my hunting's been below water in recent years. But look, again, it's just, I think New Zealanders, and particularly where I'm living at the moment, out in the Ohariu Valley, I'm living in the country. There's plenty of rabbits and things here. And I think New Zealanders, you just remember, New Zealand is one of those countries unique in the world where the more things that you hunt, the more you're doing for ecology. I mean, everywhere else you go in most countries, you've got to get a license because you're upsetting the balance by shooting a deer or a bear or whatever because they're native. Well, nothing's native unless you're hunting bats in New Zealand. You're not hunting anything that's native.
Yeah, okay. And do you get to go out much now?
No, look, I don't, and I haven't in recent years. When I go home to the coast, my brother's still on the farm. That's been most of my hunting has been reserved for that, and even that, to be quite honest, I haven't done a lot in recent years. It's sort of family, like many of these things, once the family takes over and you really end up sort of that's your other priorities. I was saying that my kids my son, who's now 30, he grew up like I did, hunting a lot of goats in particular.
Yeah, okay. So did you go out with your children when they were children? Did you give them any experiences at all that they could take on into their adult life, firearm experiences?
Yeah, my oldest son, definitely. Though not so much the younger. As I said, my middle son is intellectually disabled, and when he came along, sort of things, priorities and ability to get away sort of slowed down a little bit. But and my daughter's quite just limited opportunities, but she's certainly not squeamish when it comes to things hunting.
One of the things I've noticed in these chats that we're having with MPs is the amount of time that has been spent with children, their own children, who have now grown up and getting licenses themselves. So it's nice to see the generational side of it. From my firearm safety aspect, a lot of what we learn as adults and then on teach to our children has been successful in that space where we have very few non-intentional firearm incidents, and a lot of that is based on the education around licensing, but also the really good aspects of firearm safety that we as parents can teach our children, and they in turn teach their children as well. Now, Greg, did you do any sort of target shooting or any pistol shooting in conjunction with your work with police? Did you do any extra outside police training?
No, not really. It was all, training, on the job training. And I have to say, in the early days in the police, the training was pretty sporadic, pretty poor. Looking back on it, we were considering, getting guns in the police when we were young. You had to go back to the station to get them, sign them out. It was usually had to be a reasonably serious offence before you, particularly in the cities. A little bit different in the country, of course. But our training, all my pistol shooting was formal training.
Okay. So in your hunting experiences then, Greg, what sort of animals were you after?
Oh, goats mostly, and deer, and hares. And some of my best experiences actually were pheasants. I worked on a farm in Scotland. I did a backpacking around the world in my early 20s and ended up working on a farm up there. And that's great, the old traditional hunts there. And pheasant hunting was, that's a great sport. That's probably some of my best hunting experiences up there.
And what type of firearm did you use for that?
Oh, they were shotguns.
Yeah, 12 gauge?
Side by sides mostly.
Yeah.
Although the few over and unders, but all 2 shots.
So for those that don't know about the pheasant hunts, how does it work? Is there a group of you, a line of you? Do you have beaters out there getting the pheasants to come out? And how does
on a good, well-organised hunt, they're very social. A little bit like first day, opening day duck shooting. There's a lot of tradition around it. And you get people that are beating. And the first time you see a pheasant rise, it's very different from any other hunting you'll ever do. And shooting on the rise is a whole, you grow up hearing these expressions or reading about them from the UK, and they all come into sort of make sense when you actually experience it.
Yes, I understand that there's pheasant hunts like that here in New Zealand as well, so maybe you'll get the opportunity to relive that Kiwi style at some stage.
Yeah, I'd love to actually. It'll be that's some of my best hunting memories.
Yeah. When you were shooting the goats, did you harvest any of them? Goat curry come along at any stage, or was it just to dispatch the mobs?
No, mostly dispatch, but we ate them. I got a leg of kid was, and often, particularly up places like when you go hunting up the rivers of the West Coast, the rain sets in. And it's not always possible to go and get yourself a leg of venison or a backsteak. It's more, the goats are much handier. I remember going on one trip where we got trapped in a hut at the Forks there and couldn't get out, but eels and goats were our diet for about a week. Didn't taste any venison.
Oh, the good old West Coast weather, making you stuck in a hut.
Going possuming, getting stuck in a tent for 3 or 4 days when the rain just won't stop at all. And by the time you get out there, all your cyanide's washed away.
Yeah. Sounds like you've had quite a bit of experience, though. What with the rabbits? Did you eat those as well? Crock pot?
No, didn't have rabbits on the West Coast. It was too wet. No, hares we had down there.
Sorry, hares.
Yeah. Well, I didn't tend to. I mean, it was a bit of a novelty. There's not a lot of, when you're in a family of 10, there's not a lot of eating in a hare.
So it sounds.
Well, he ate possums. I remember my cousin was studying possums he was doing his PhD in possums and studying them on the West Coast. And he used to come over and from the university, and his mates come over and trap them, and they'd cook possum. So they're perfectly edible. Yeah,
so I guess I've never tried that, and I'm not really keen to either. So
yeah, I'm trying to remember the taste. My memory of it is very red. I can't remember it, and I haven't done it for years. All I can remember was the novelty of it.
Yeah, I've been out possum shooting, but that was more just to pluck the skins, not to eat them. So yeah, something different there. I see my lights changing in the room.
Greg, look, I have to ask you, because what you've experienced is obviously different types of calibers, 22, shotgun, centerfire. So for hunting, what would be the ultimate caliber to go hunting with, in your opinion?
Look, I'm not sort of portraying myself as a big time hunter in any way. Mine was a classic New Zealand growing up, 3.0, good old Lee Enfield. Is that I just, most of my hunting, the odd 222, but really it was Lee Enfield, good old 303, and they were the pretty prevalent firearms when I grew up. The odd Ruger around. I think my uncle had a Ruger, and my uncle Jim, he was a great hunter. He's I think the West Coast Buller Deerstalk Association, big stalwart of that. He had a good old armory. And I think I do remember being a young and pulling out a pistol one time when we were pretty young. And I remember going back when he died, really hunting through the house, wondering if he had it hidden up in the rafters or somewhere like that, but it never turned up. So I presume he must have either thrown it in the river, if I know him, or he'd have probably maybe handed it into one of the amnesties.
Yeah, yeah. There were quite a few of the pistols that came back from World War II, and sat in many cupboards of many of our returned servicemen or their family members for some time. I think some of them still come out of the woodwork every now and again as well, but most of them.
Well, it's an interesting history, that, because there were a lot of firearms and they were a problem. There was a but what happened is that through the 50s and 60s, they got old, and if they hadn't been kept, they hadn't been stored properly, most of them weren't that good. And even I was able to remind people during the firearms legislation, there's talk about the parts and why there's so much legislation. Well, what was done was that many of those parts were stored in different places, so that you could put them all together if you needed to. So that was why people wondered why the legislation was quite prescriptive about parts of firearms, and that was why it was done, so that to prevent people from storing different parts and different properties, and they could be put back together again. So there were actually, you look at the history, there was actually quite an issue during the 50s and 60s of those firearms around the place.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
most of them got too old, like the rest of us.
Now, as for your favourite caliber, I've got to agree with you. My hunting rifle, my main hunting rifle is a 303. I did invest in a Weatherby 7mm 08, but one of my daughters has taken that from me as her hunting rifle. And while it has already shot its first deer, and not by me, I just stick with the good old trusty 303 in sporting configuration, and I absolutely love it. It does the job, whether it's a fallow deer or a red deer. It really does the job. So you've had quite a bit of experience, and you're now sitting in Parliament helping to make some decisions. The third debate in the House will be upon us at some time soon on that second tranche of legislation, and I'm hoping that our viewers have at least had this opportunity to listen to Greg and listen to his experiences and some of his knowledge around firearms legislation. And, while we do hope you throw it out, Greg, I know you're not, but I'm hoping that our viewers will at least have an understanding that there are some other people within Parliament that do know some stuff. And we're hoping that we have an outcome that will be beneficial for everybody in the end.
Nicole, can I just sum up by saying, my belief is that every New Zealander, we've got a fantastic hunting country. This is not a hunting debate. And you will have heard me getting into some of our submitters. And anyone who came in who tried to listen to an anti-hunting thing, I was very quick to remind that it isn't about that. This is a fantastic country for hunting, and I want my kids and grandkids to have the same opportunities I had. But we've just got to accept the world has changed, and things did need fixing. This was always going to happen. I predicted in 2015 in the paper, it's an article in the Dom, that we would end up with an incident like this. I thought it wouldn't be from the place it came from, because someone would realise how easy our firearms laws were. So something was always going to have to happen. And I think if you're a legitimate hunter, you don't need to be too worried about these. It's going to change a little bit, because there's another thing that you need to realise is that at the moment, firearms have been so easy to get for the last 10 to 15 years. They haven't had to really go looking. Now, police have already seizing a lot of firearms. People are going to have to go looking for them now. So actually the security of firearms is going to have to be a bigger issue in the future than it has been in the past, simply because they're going to be scarcer and the illegal ones are going to be a lot harder to replace.
And I think coming from our perspective, the council have always said that we would be partial to being part of any resolution, and we did realise and had made statements ourselves that we believed that there needed to be some update in the 1983 Arms Act, but we are concerned at some of the larger changes in that second tranche of legislation that affect firearm owners adversely when it should be targeted at criminals. But let's not get into that, because this is a short interview and we could really go on for ages in the discussion with this, and have our viewers want to join in as well. But this is about just talking about your experiences with firearms, and most of the MPs I've spoken to, their experiences have actually been while out hunting. I think there's only two that have had some range experiences with target shooting. But it's nice to know that there's at least one person in each of those main political parties that does have some knowledge and some background. And I hope that that gives our viewers some confidence as we move into the third reading in the House. So Greg, I'd just like to thank you very much for taking the time to join us today and share some of some of your experiences with our viewers, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicole, and congratulations on the job you do too.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa anō. Thanks for watching our video, and please feel free to share that with your friends, spread it far and wide so they can see the calibre of the MPs that will be debating the second tranche of legislation in the House. Also, thank you for your support, and come along to the Fair and Reasonable campaign. If you're not already following and supporting us, we encourage you to do so you can keep in touch with what's going on in the House. Thanks again, everybody. Take care out there.